What's going on, everybody? This is Nate and Brian here with the Warriors of Light podcast.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back. Welcome back.
Today we'll be talking about the power of our thoughts and our words, the spoken word, and meditation. So, Brian, do you want to start with meditation?
Absolutely. Um, so me personally, I've been practicing meditation. I started my meditation practice in like late 2016. Um, and I've been doing that since. I meditate usually twice a day. Um, both times, no really set time amount of time, usually 30 to 45 minutes, but it can go longer or shorter depending upon the day. But it's funny because I've taught meditation groups and classes for the last, well, when I had my business. So I would say like the last probably 5 years or so, or 6 years, whatever it was or is. And I will say that meditation is like one of the most beautiful and natural tools we can use to obviously find our inner peace and our inner balance. Most people are running around like, train wrecks, just in chaos all the time in their heads. And I tell people, like, when you can sit in that quiet moment, whether it's in silence or with meditation music. You and I were just talking about this off camera. I always tell people listen to 528 hertz meditation music. They say that there's been multiple studies over the last several years where they say 528 hertz like literally connects you to the divine immediately. And it really does. The one I use like literally puts me into a space of complete, like, an utter peace almost instantaneously as I close my eyes and I just kind of breathe into my meditation. Um, and I tell people, I'm like, there's so many side benefits to meditation. I tell people, like, it makes you more youthful. It actually slows aging. It makes your brain healthier, makes your body healthier. But it also just puts you into that place of complete and utter, like, quiet peace, right? Um, I tell people, like, so many people that I work with or talk to or coach or whatever, they're like, man, I'm just always stressed out. They're doing anything they can to deal with their stress, whether it's, scrolling on the phone or, watching TV or whatever it is, like, using external things, looking for external stimuli to basically, um, try to find that place of peace. And I tell people, like, like, you never do, because that external stimuli will never get you there. It's there temporarily. You're like, oh man, it's great, and then it's gone, right? So
Yeah.
for me, meditation has been that thing that, like, once I found that initially, like, I tell people, meditation, initial practice of it, people are like, I can't get my mind to be quiet. I always tell people, listen, you're not going to get your mind quiet most of the time. It's literally just being able to close your eyes, do some breath work, and sit and not move for an extended period of time. And never, and when you're there, the ego is going to tell you, like, what are you doing? You're wasting time. Get up, grab your phone, do something to distract me. And I tell people, the minute you don't follow that, scientifically, they've shown that you literally just made a small change in your brain every time you sit and don't move, right? You just made a new neural pathway. Um, and so I tell people, like, like, just sit in this meditation and find your peaceful place. And then, of course, a part of meditation practice that I use is visualization. So I visualize myself either doing things that I know that I want to achieve in this life, or that I want to do, and I see myself as it's already done. And I tell people, like, your mind doesn't know, your subconscious mind, your mind doesn't know what's real and what's not. So I tell people, when you visualize, your mind doesn't know, like, oh, is that really happening? So it'll lead you toward those things, right? And bring experiences to you. That's the other thing with meditation. And, if you want to put meditation with manifestation, I tell people, once you learn how to deeply meditate and you learn how to get into a state of that complete and utter, like, divine alignment and peace, you can bring things to you very quickly, right? Instead of chasing things. I tell people are always chasing after things, and all you're doing is pushing it away. And I always tell people, what you seek is seeking you as well. But if you learn how to get into that peaceful divine alignment, things come to you almost out of nowhere, right? But then you kind of expect that at that point. You're like, oh, look, this opportunity showed up, this person showed up, this financial thing that I needed showed up. I mean, you and I have talked about that since we've known each other, and, I've experienced it many times where I'm just like, I felt like I really wanted this thing to happen, But instead of like chasing after it or stressing over it, I just get into a deep meditative, prayer state, and it's just like all of a sudden these things just start showing up, bam, bam, bam. And I'm, there you go, right?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a very interesting, actually a very important point, and it's actually something that I've dealt with one of my kids. Is that we told you earlier in the day that uh, that's what the whole concept behind the power of our thoughts and our words, because and meditation, because how many people in society look to external things to like solve their problem when all the power is really within each one of us, you know? So like what exactly what you said. How many people after work, they get home, they're like, "Oh, I had dinner and oh, I'm just going to watch Netflix until I go to bed." Or they wake up in the morning and they immediately that, the brain turns on and you're like, "Oh no, I got to do this, go to work." Like you just start we're just on a constant like hamster wheel almost of craziness. And I wonder how many people actually allow themselves to quiet down and slow down and like, speak out like, "Oh, today is a good day,"
Mm,
or, or being grateful for things instead of, I think we're hyper fixated as a society on like what we have to do versus what we need to do,
mm-hmm,
you know? And that falls in line with meditation because when you meditate, I started meditating probably like 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, like actually doing it. And yeah, I had never really tried it before. And when the first time I tried it, my brain was going crazy. Like all these thoughts were just rushing through my head, like even to the point where if I heard a sound, I was in a closed room with nobody else in it, but if I heard a sound outside of it, it's like you're focusing so much that you're kind of hyper aware of everything around you too. So it's learning how to, if you don't have headphones in, you're learning how to focus your mind on yourself so that like you said, it's not going to be completely quiet. But I would say now when I do meditate, it's more focused, it's more streamlined, and I can kind of hone in. But I think all three of those things, our thoughts and our words and meditating, they all coincide with each other because that's energy.
mm-hmm,
So when you're meditating, it's, I guess the way I would put it is that when you're meditating, you're almost kind of like regenerating your battery, recharging kind of
mm,
thing. So
absolutely.
then it gives you time to like, when, how people like panic or in a stressful situation, it's like that's not going to help anything.
No,
But we live in such a fast-paced world now that it's like go, 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 instant gratification instead of just like, let's take this one day at a time. Let's focus on right now, the moment, like we've talked about before, and then focus on what you want. And I agree with you too, because I've used that to, like you said, meditation and manifestation are kind of pretty much parallels of each other.
mm-hmm,
Because when you can hone your energy and your mind onto what you want to manifest, because we're all creators too,
absolutely.
then you can create your reality the way you want if you can really focus on it. It's a combination of focusing your energy and work. But if you speak it out and then a few days later, things start to kind of align like little by little. Maybe it could be the smallest thing. Like, oh, traffic wasn't crazy today. Or,
Mm,
oh, I had enough time today, or that you feel like time slows down or something silly like that. But it's not silly, but those are little inclinations of like, oh, this is working.
absolutely. I tell people like something small that you can do as you're starting, to find that alignment, that divine alignment, is something small like a parking space. Like I'm going to manifest the perfect parking space right in front of where I'm going right now. And you speak it out with confidence and you get there and you'll see a person pulling out of the first spot or the first spot is open and you just, and that's a very small thing. But like I tell people, once you start to see the small evidence, the small synchronicities in life happen, you're like, oh my gosh, like I really do have power. And that's what I tell people is like, because again, we're taught and we're conditioned and programmed to believe that we have very little power. And I'm like, no, 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 and I always, that's why I always tell people, like, biblically, I'm like, Jesus was telling you the least among me can do what I do and greater, because that's what he was trying to say, is that, like, you can create and you can do the things I do. Like, Jesus spoke it out with confidence because Jesus knew we're all a part of God, right? So he spoke it out with confidence and things happened. We, on the other hand, like we were talking about, I think off camera, we were saying, most of the time when people are praying or speaking, please, please, come on, this and that. And I'm like, God's like, what are you doing? Like, you're a part of me. Speak it out with confidence, and I'm going to help you achieve whatever it is that you're wanting to have happen. Right. And if it's not exactly what you think should happen, it's because God's going to give you that or something greater. And then to go back on, like we were saying with meditation, and what did Jesus say? The kingdom of heaven is within. It's within. So the kingdom of heaven is inside of us, right? Like, so I tell people, like, the kingdom of heaven is inside of you. Like, you find that peace. You find that through meditation. You find that through silence. You find that through being with yourself. And being, perfect example, we are called human beings, not human doings, right? We've been conditioned to believe we're human doings. Go, go, move, go, go, gotta hurry up and keep going doing things. And I'm like, but we're human beings. So I think people are starting to realize more. I know they've known this, like in the Eastern world for a long time, is just be. Find your silence, find your place, like sit and be in silence, right? Sit and be with our great creator. And like I tell people, then all of a sudden, when you're in that divine alignment, you can make things happen. So it's like I say, like the ascended masters, or the divine masters of the world. Like there's the book Autobiography of a Yogi, and there's a lot of stories in there where he saw people, these gurus in India and stuff, but they're not even gurus, they were just like divine masters, like where they would just make things happen through their thoughts, boom, and something would happen like immediately within a moment, right? But it's because they understood their power. We understood, like, hey, we are very powerful. But over here in the Western world, we've been taught the complete opposite for a long time. I think things are shifting now, and I see a lot of it shifting now because there's a lot more people understanding, like, spiritually, how we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and people are starting to understand, like, oh my gosh, like, we really do have power,
Yeah.
right? But you still have, and I'm not putting anybody down, but you still have a lot of people that are opposed to that. When you try to tell them that, they're like, oh my god, no, we're supposed to be less than. It's like, well, I mean, that's your choice. I always tell people, high five if that's how you want to feel, but I don't feel that way. You know what I mean? Like, I understand my power.
Yeah. I mean, we all have. That's what's. That's how people are easily manipulated. Is when you fall in line with a certain belief system, and then you never think. You're never introduced, or maybe at some point in your life you are introduced to another idea, but you're too closed-minded because you've been programmed to think a certain way. You're like,
Mhm.
oh, that's not what I was taught, so no, no, no. But then if you actually just awaken your mind and kind of like, huh, like curiosity is one of the tools that we have. So why not explore it? If you're not hurting anybody, like
Absolutely.
look into if you're, look into meditating, look into energy, look into frequencies, look into spirit, because uh like for example, actually what you said. So what I do, we've talked about how prayer is kind of like a form of meditation, right? Or like manifestation, right? But like just the other day, I had to handle a conflict, and what I did was not only did I pray, I was like, God help me, or God please allow this to go well, blah blah blah. I did that, but then also within myself, I was like, this is gonna go fine. And I was like confident, like you said, confidently speaking it out, like this is gonna go smooth. This is how I'm gonna handle it. Boom, boom, boom. And it was like it went so smooth. It was like a 2-minute conversation. So I'm like, perfect. And
Yeah.
everything was resolved right there. So it's like, but if I would have went into that like in any other type of energy, then it could have been a different outcome. Because that's another thing too, is you get out what you put in. Or like you say, or like we say, you attract what you put out.
You
You
attract, I tell people, you attract what you are, right?
Yeah.
The energy that you put out is what you get back. And, you know, yeah, I that's why I say when I go into things, whether it's a meeting, when I do a meditation group or whatever it is, um, I pray and meditate beforehand, and I already set the intention of this is going to go this way. It's going to go beautifully. It's going to go whatever. Um, and that's typically, like you said, it'll just flow very nicely, whatever it is. But it's going in with that confidence. It's kind of funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, if you literally just walk around understanding the power that you are, and that's not in a cocky way, that's not in a way of like, oh, I'm just negative power. No, no, no.
Yeah, you have to be you have to be humble with it, but have a healthy understanding.
Yeah, you're like, you humbly understand like the divine power that you have, um, and you carry yourself everywhere you go in that power. You see how like even other people perceive you, right?
Yeah.
People feel your energy. Like I tell people, like, I can see somebody walking in with their head hanging low, shoulders down, like it's just like you can just tell that they're just heavy. They're like, like you said, like we were saying, you what you put out is what you get back. So if you put out that like very like very sad energy, that's typically what you get back, right? For me, it's like, I really consciously think about like, no, I'm gonna walk around confident, even if the day for whatever reason isn't the best day for me. Um, I'm like, I don't care. Like, not every day is gonna be beautiful. I tell my clients all the time, like, they think like, well, I don't feel like doing this today. I'm like, there's gonna be many days you wake up and you don't feel like doing shit. Do it anyway. You know? Oh, you don't feel like being confident? I don't care. Be confident anyway. You don't feel like running that extra mile? I don't give a shit. Run it anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. Because we're gonna have many times in this human experience where we don't want to do certain things, but you do it anyway, right? With confidence, and you put that energy out there, like, hey, I'm the king of this day for myself, you know, and then
Yeah,
you,
and then you're not only for yourself, but for those that
yeah,
rely on you, right?
absolutely.
Because if you're like, for example, with my kids, like if I react like it's just like parenting, kind of. If you react in a negative manner, then that energy is going to be transferred, and then everybody's going to be negative. But
Absolutely.
if you handle something positively, then that energy will also kind of transfer, so to speak. You know?
Absolutely. I think about that. Like, an example I can use just from my life is when I was a paramedic, and everything was going to shit on a call. And I literally, to be completely honest, sometimes inside of me, I was like, oh shit, what's going on? But did I ever project that out to the world? No, because everybody else on the scene that was looking at me as the medical authority, if I would have shown them that I was like, oh my gosh, look at this mess, they would have been like, well, what the fuck are we all gonna do? You know what I mean? And so like people used to always tell me, they were like, dude, you always seem so composed. And I would be honest with them after a call. I'd be like, yeah, I was like inside for a minute there, I was shitting. But I internally I would compose myself and be like, hey, this is what I got to do. But that was the energy I was trying to put out. It was like, I just want everybody to understand, like, hey, I got this. Like, we're all gonna be okay. You know. Um, and so, yeah, you think about like what you do give out, like you said, even like with your kids, like when something's going on with your kids and you're trying to lead them, we're not going to be perfect. Cause like, that's why I tell people there's so many books on parenting. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, that like every soul is different, right? So good luck with reading that book and thinking you're going to parent every soul that way. Good fucking luck. Cause it's not going to happen. Like, it's just the bottom line. Like every soul is so different and it's supposed to be, we're all supposed to be different. And so I tell people like, there is no one way to parent, you know, that's one place I found myself in, I guess, disagreements with like, past exes or whatever you know, we got to parent this one way. I'm like, there is no one way to parent because every soul is different,
It's
you know?
just like what we talk about, where you have to be able to flow and
Yes.
adapt. You have to be able to flow and adapt, because what you think is going to happen, like we're talking about the power of our words and our thoughts, but at the same time, we also can't manipulate other people's actions. So like, or we can't always influence how people feel, because they're their own, like you said, they're their own soul, they're their own person. So, and that's one of the rules. We can't interfere with people's free will, right? So like, um, and another part of manifestation and meditation is visualization, not just words and thoughts, but when you're thinking, you can also visualize what you want or what you desire, you know. And if you make that a positive thing, like when I meditate, or even when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, thank you, God, for this day. I'm grateful. Allow me to spread love and light to the world today. And I say that every morning.
Hmm.
And then I basically kind of claim, I'm like, today is a good day.
Absolutely.
And like I feel like when I do that, I kind of feel like an energy, like we talked about channeling. Like it's like instant. I feel it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like I'm calm. I'm good. Like let's make things happen. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I literally say very similar. When I first wake up, my initial prayers is that, and I always say, God, speak to me and through me today in everything I do, right? So instead of me trying to lead the day through ego, and I'm gonna make this happen, and I'm gonna say certain things, it's like, no, I'm like, God, you speak to me and through me, you know what I mean? And my interactions tend to go so much more naturally and better, no matter where I'm at, no matter who I encounter, because I literally focus on allowing myself to not constantly be in the mind. See, that's the other thing too, is I tell people is, see, it's kind of so Ram Dass. I don't know if many people know who Ram Dass is. His name was Richard Alpert, but he was given the name Ram Dass when he went to India, and he came back when he came back from India, and he's taught so many like deep spiritual teachings. And like he used to say, he was a Harvard professor for a while until they fired him because he was when he got deep into spirituality, started he was doing they were doing LSD, and he was using LSD, and they were having deep spiritual like groups, right? Like he wasn't doing it just to be high. He was doing it to have this like spiritual connection, right? And so he started having people like over to his apartment, had these groups and stuff anyway. So Harvard found out about it, fired him. But like he said, he used to say, um, once he got really deep into the spiritual aspect of who we are, which is exactly who we are, we're spirits having a human experience. He said, he goes, like intellect, humans want to live off intellect all the time. He goes, look where the fuck that got us, right? We think like, it's like intellect's got us to so many stupid places when we just live out of the head, you know. And that's why I'm learning more and more, and it takes practice every day, but I learn more and more to live out of my heart,
yeah,
to
because
deeply from who I am, from my heart, not from my brain.
you just made me think like it's important to be logical and reasonable, but that's
Yeah.
not the only concept of the human mind.
No, have discernment, but or
But
use.
what I'm saying is there's some people who are like overly logical. Like basically what we were talking about earlier, what I'm basically saying is there's people who try to reason through everything and they inevitably pretty much lack faith. They don't have a faith bone in their body, you know what I mean? Where
Mhm.
it's like, oh, or when something's happening and you're like, oh, or you got to buy a house or something, and you're like, oh, I don't see a logical way for this to work out. And then but what people don't realize of what they're doing is if you're saying that, then you're resisting what you want to have happen. But I think faith is a huge part of manifestation and energy, because if you don't believe in it, then it's not going to happen. It's just like that quote, if whether you think you can or you can't, you're right, you know?
Yep. And yeah, when you speak something, like I say, I always tell people speak and don't worry about the outcome, but speak as if whatever it is that you're speaking out is already done. It's
Right.
it's
Right.
like in present tense, right? So I always tell people, I am, right? The Bible, when God said, "I am that I am," to Moses, it's I am. So I always tell people, like, whatever follows, I am better be good and better be positive, right? So I am strong, I am beautiful, I am love, I am light, I'm, whatever. It should always be a very positive tense and a present tense, like So I am a you know light to the world, not instead of, you don't put it in the future. I'm going to be, I wish to be, whatever. So I tell people, no, speak as if it's already happened. And it doesn't matter, like, because see, that's the thing with humans. Again, it goes back to the intellect, right? So Wayne Dyer used to, and again, one of my greatest spiritual mentors, if not the greatest spiritual mentor for me, he used to say, once when you believe it, then you'll see it, right?
Oh yeah,
And so I
absolutely.
love that because I was like, that's so true. Like when you believe it, you'll see that thing happen. But see, what are we taught? Oh, once I see it, then I'll believe it. It's like, no, it's like, why do you have so many people that don't believe we have a great creator, that we have this great God? Because they're like, well, I don't see anything. You don't see anything. Do you see all of this beautiful nature that's created out here? How the hell do you think it happened? You know what I mean? And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, that's all the evidence you need. You know, I live over here by the ocean. When I'm over here at the ocean, I'm just my son and I were out there earlier, and we were walking along the ocean, like just like collecting shells and doing things. And I'm just like, look at this beauty. Like this is amazing. Like that's all the evidence I need. You
Well,
know.
that's another thing too, is like if you want to find God, then go in nature, man.
Yeah.
Like we talked about this earlier today. When I was a kid, I've always believed, and we were talking about what I shared about, I go into the woods to lose my mind and find my soul.
Mhm.
That's where I think that like if you were to meditating outside is pretty much perfect.
It's
Because
amazing.
you're in nature, you're not in a box that some person built, you know. You're but you also have to understand that there's that it's almost like pure and like a clean energy,
Hmm.
like have you ever heard that you can like ground yourself by walking on the grass? And
On the ground.
now it's scientifically proven,
Yeah.
not just spiritually. And they even say like if you talk to plants, if you're mean to them or if you're nice to them, they shift.
Yep.
And it's the same thing. We just watched A Dog's Life yesterday, I think is what it's called, or A Dog's Purpose or something like that. And it was about this dog that keeps reincarnating and coming back. And it was basically a movie about a dog's like what a dog's purpose is and a dog's love to humans.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it made me think, I'm like, well, that makes sense because like why do humans and dogs have such a deep connection? And I used to think it was just our primal thing, like, oh, it was a survival thing. When we were cavemen, we needed a companion to help us. But I think it's deeper than that, and that's with everything. Like, go out in nature, go on a hike, go on a walk, bring the kids, and just like appreciate the creation that we're in. Because like you were talking about with that Harvard professor, Ramdas, um, what most people end up realizing is if you look long enough, you realize that everything is connected. It's all the same. Like we're all one.
We're
But
all one.
yeah. So how could you not find faith or God if especially if you're in the creation that He made?
Well, that's what I'm saying. God's omnipresent, right? So God is in every aspect of this life, and that's why I say, like, I learned to look at people and just smile and love the difference of them. Like, when you see people expressing themselves differently through their look or through whatever, right? And I'm like, I look at people and I'm like, man, like, there's beauty in every single one of us. You know, I used to catch myself years ago before I got, you know, I've always been spiritual, but not this deep. Um, I catch myself judging, right?
Yeah.
And judging people and judging situations and things. And um, now, I mean, not that I'm by all means I'm not perfect in it, but I do my very best to not judge at all because I look at people and I say, okay, like we all have God's beauty because we're all a part of God, right? And even when people are doing something that we might like, maybe I might think or someone else might think like, oh my gosh, that's annoying, or look at that person with this issue, they're experiencing their journey the best that they can with
Well,
with what.
not only that, but I'll give you this one. They're experiencing their journey the way it's meant to be experienced, and we're experiencing by us seeing that, we're seeing that for a reason to teach us not to judge people. So it's
Yep.
all encompassing.
Yep. I truly believe, and I think I've said this in some of our other podcasts, but I truly believe that two of the main reasons that we came to this life was to learn unconditional love and no judgment, right? So that's basically hand in hand. Is when you love everybody unconditionally, then you don't judge them, right? Like I love, you for all your intricacies and all your quirks and all your things, and that goes for everybody, right? And like I tell people all the time, like I learned that more and more every day just to love people even when they're doing goofy, like I might look at it and be like that's some goofy shit, but you know what I mean. But instead of me judging that, I'm just like I just smile and I'm like, hey, that's who they are, it's okay. If you're not harming anybody, I always tell people this, I'm like, if you're not harming anyone with what you're doing, have fun, right? Do what you're gonna do, experience your journey, because as long as you're not harming anybody, I don't care, I'm gonna love you through it, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, a lot of people have insecurities and they don't feel that confidence to be themselves because they're afraid that they'll be judged.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I tell people, I tell my kids and I tell anybody that, when someone comes to me and says, well, these people said this, I'm like, do you love you? Yeah. I'm like, that's all that matters, right? Because guess what? I don't care who you are. Look at Jesus. People can say like, look at Jesus, and people hated him in the Bible left and right. Right. I mean,
Yeah, we were
because
talking about that earlier today.
yeah, he was being himself, and people were talking shit to him all the time. And that's why, like I said, like we talked about earlier that there was a negative comment on one of the reels that you made, I think it was, right? And like I told you, I was like, there's always going to be somebody talking shit. I don't care what you do, I don't care who you are. There's always going to be somebody. And again, like we talked about earlier, and I always tell people this, remember, when someone's talking shit, they're projecting out on to other people or to the planet their insecurities within themselves, right? So that's why I always say, like, if someone says something about me, I'm like, man, that poor person, they're just unhappy with themselves. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
like, because that's the thing is like, I don't take enough time to look at what other people are doing to talk shit about them, because I'm like I have to look at myself every day and be like, okay, like how can I be a little bit better today? And I don't judge myself either. It's just more of like, how can I be a little bit better version today? You know what I'm saying? Because that's the other thing too, is I think that's another big issue is most people don't like themselves, right?
Not only do most people not like themselves, but now we've had a societal shift where people don't I think it's a natural tendency for humans to serve others, and I believe that we're being led, or last generation of people, there's no longer that implementation of what can I do to help other people. It's all about what can I do to help myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's the wrong way to live life, because that's what fucking Jesus wanted us to do, is help each other, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the whole point. Like, again, and that's the other thing too. Think about like non-judgment. So in the Bible, when the Pharisees were always talking shit to Jesus because they were like, "Why are you hanging out with those people that are like hookers and tax collectors and all this stuff?" And Jesus was like, "Dude, like I'm gonna love everybody." Like he said, there's like the healthy people don't need a doctor, right? And it's not even that. It's like for me, it's like I look at it as I love everyone, and I don't care where I'm at. Like I literally could go to a brewery and be having a beer, and I'll start having a very spiritual conversation with people, like every time I'm in one of these places. And literally, like I'll meet great people and have great conversations, right? But if you were to meet very religious people, not to put anybody down, but they're going to tell you like that's wrong. And I'm like, why is that wrong? Like I speak of God no matter where I'm at because I love God. And if you do truly read the Bible and understand what Jesus was saying, Jesus was like, yeah, just love everyone unconditionally, and you can be anywhere and be speaking of God at any place and be doing God's work no matter where you are. You
Yeah,
know what
that's
I'm
why that's why I'm grateful that that stuff wasn't really pushed on me as a kid,
Yeah.
because now that I reflect back on it, it led to the same thing anyway. Which is why I believe there's more than one pathway to God, right? But everyone's journey is going to be different for a reason, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not up to anybody else to dictate how that person finds, divinity or whatever. As long, like you said, as long as it's not hurting anybody. But but like you said, there's people who have been programmed or raised a certain way, and if I say there's more than one pathway to God, then there's those people who will be like, there's only one pathway to God. That's Jesus. That's the Bible. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
bro, open your mind. Like, imagine if someone, like, how much better would life be if everybody just kind of like, oh yeah, maybe I will think about this way, or look at things from a different perspective at least.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, again, going back to my spiritual mentor, Wayne Dyer, he used to say, have a mind open to everything and attached to nothing. And I tell people, like, if you have a very open mind, you'd be surprised what you learn. When I was still really kind of one narrow way of thinking, before I started down this path, probably in 2016, I was that way too. Whereas like I would say I always had kind of an open mind, but I thought that there was like just this one set way of really doing things, right? Um, and then I started to learn and grow and read these books and find these, they say when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And like these teachers started appearing for me. And I'm like, holy, like, dude, look at this. Like spiritually, I just expanded and grew. Um, but like you said, like I know that a lot of people will say like, no, that's not right. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why is there only one way? And that's like you said, imagine if we were all just curious, like just have that mind of just like, like instead of arguing with each other, instead of letting the ego be in charge, saying like, no, this is the way things have to be done. Why don't we listen to someone's point of view, listen to someone that follows a different route, and just be like, that's interesting. Like, and because like I tell people, when you hear something or you read a book or you listen to a podcast or whatever, like whatever sits with your soul, then take that. And what doesn't, disregard it, right? Doesn't mean you have to argue about it. Doesn't mean you have to disprove it. You can just literally be like, yeah, that doesn't sit well with me, but this sat really well with me, and like I'm gonna adopt this and use this, which is basically what I've done over the last several years from my life. And literally, like spiritually, it's taken me down this whole other path to look at life completely different, right? I mean, like we've talked about before, where I understand, like I truly believe that we're always being led, that God's leading us every day, like in everything we do. We can think that we're always making the decision. Again, that goes down to the human intellect, the monkey mind, and but at the end of the day, God's over here like, no, 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 like I'm gonna put this person in front of you, I'm gonna give you this opportunity, or I'm gonna have you sit back for a while, and it may seem like life isn't doing much, but I need you to be quiet right now because I'm hoping that you'll work on yourself and grow and whatever, right? I mean, like we're always being guided. I
Well,
believe
right,
that.
because we're like what you just said is a lot of times things are a test, right? Like we were talking about witchcraft earlier, and like that's what the Salem witch hunts were. It's like, oh well, if they drown, then they're not a witch, right? It's like what,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
But that's what I'm saying. Like when I think back, like I didn't become like I've always been spiritual, I would say, but not anywhere near as I would not be as spiritual as I am now if I hadn't learned from my wife and her mother, and they're witches,
yeah,
you know? So it's
yep,
like I wouldn't be as open because like that's what over the years made me think I'm like there really is more than one way to do something or get to the same point because we've talked about this before. I believe that all the major religions or any religion, it all leads to the same thing,
yeah,
right? The
yeah,
creator, God. So like,
absolutely.
um, but our monkey mind, like you said, gets in the way, and like especially when Christianity was like taking over the world, and like it was used as a tool by mankind to claim power. That's when it was being corrupted because, and that's what I think about the church. Well, not every church, but like people talk about the Vatican and all this other stuff, and like priests touching little kids and all this other shit. I'm like, so is that what God wanted you to do? I don't think so.
Exactly, exactly. No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, like we I think we touched on it the last podcast. So that's the same thing with me. Like I have nothing against church. I mean, I guarantee you that there are great places out there really trying to do good, and to teach people amazing things. I mean, I know Michael Beckwith has the Agape Center in Los Angeles, right here in California, and he says he has people of all faiths that show up, and he just talks about God, and he talks about like our like that we are part of God and like those types of things, but it's not in a religious sense. And that's what I tell people. It's like it's not about religion, man. It's about our connection to the creator. We all, like you said, every religion goes back to the same one God. You know, I don't care if
Yep.
they say Jesus, Shiva, Buddha, whatever. It's ultimately going back to one God. I believe that God has put obviously like these spirit, these ascended masters like Jesus on the planet in different times, but like um, to show people like, hey, look at the power. Look, we're all created. We're all one. We're all connected, but humans take it to another level. It's like, no, this is the only one, that this is the main, this is the only God's son. And I'm like, no, Jesus even said we're all equal. We're all God's sisters and sisters, sorry, daughters and sons. And you know what I mean? But like, that's not what we're taught when we go a lot of times to these churches and stuff. And it's like, dude, like, I mean, let's open up our, let's broaden our horizons. Let's start living from our heart and start really, like I said, when I read the Bible now, I have a whole different context of what Jesus was saying compared to what I did years ago.
Well, that's you just made me think about, excuse me, what I told you earlier when me and my wife were talking about. She mentioned something about how people born in a certain time period are old souls, and that we're
Yeah.
here to help people awaken. And that's the whole concept of why you and I started this podcast, is to
Yes.
like, that's why it's called Warriors of Light, because we have that warrior spirit, but we're trying to help people with talking about stuff like this
Yeah.
and sharing our experiences. And like, it made me think, I'm like, yeah, because my whole life I've been told by random people, like, you're an old soul. I'm like, okay, roger that. And I've always felt a lot older than I am. And like and you've probably heard like, oh, if you're an old soul, you don't really fit in with a lot of people and blah blah blah. It's
You and
like,
I've
yeah,
talked. Yeah.
huh?
You and I've talked about that many times. How we've never felt like we fully fit
Yeah,
in. Um, I've always felt like that too. Like, I feel like I've always had good friends, good people. I still have some, some really good friends in my life, but uh, I never felt like I fully fit into any group. I was always kind of just like, oh well, this doesn't sit well with me, you know?
same, same. Yeah, I mean, even in the, I mean, even now that I think about it, in the military, it was different. But like now, in the like, for example, the veteran community, I'm just like, whatever, dude. Like, I'll help you, but I'm not gonna like go like, I'll support like nonprofits and stuff, but I'm not gonna go to every organization that exists and like, oh, I'm a veteran, I'm a veteran. I don't know. It seems kind of disingenuous to kind of, like those people who are like super overly nice. Like, yeah, there's something wrong with you. That's
Yeah.
what I think about it when people try to help. It's almost like they're trying to help, and it's like a more of a detriment than it is a positive thing, because they're
Well, and yet,
trying to fulfill something within themselves, but at the same time they're projecting that on others too.
absolutely. And you think about that, um, whether it's not just veterans, anybody, right? Like humans are in the human aspect of things. Humans are always trying to fit into somewhere and be accepted, right?
Dude, that's what's
But
beautiful. That's what's beautiful. I don't care if I'm accepted or not.
exactly. And that's exactly how I feel. It's funny because, again, going back to my spiritual mentor, Wayne Dyer, that's why I've always loved his work, because he used to say, he taught people how to be a self actualized person. He goes, a self actualized person doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks of them, good or bad. Right. And don't get me wrong, I definitely have had the, periods and times in my life where I'm like, I realize now where I was looking for approval, um, and didn't realize that's what I was doing. Now though, now the place I'm at, I can give a shit less. Like I love people, but I don't need them to say, "Hey, Brian, you're doing great." You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's exactly what we were just talking about with how people are looking for external things to
Mm-hmm.
solve their problems. It's like all the power is within us as an individual. Each person has the power to change their life for the better. If so, that's why, you could do something as simple as do a meditation for 10 minutes. Is it going to be perfect? No. But if you go into it having no expectations and you practice it every day, 10 minutes, you know, then you'll start to realize, like, oh, maybe this is kind of catching on. Then you'll start to notice little differences, like, oh, my mindset's more positive. Things are
I'm
kind of aligning.
I'm less reactive. I see more synchronicities. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cause that, like, man, like it's a basic concept. Like, no one's going to solve your problems or make you happy but you.
Yeah. Happiness is a state of mind. It's a choice, right? I think I often hear people, which I used to do this too, is I will be happy when X, Y, and Z happens, right? And I've learned that no, no, no. I'm going to choose to be happy right now. Like I'm going to choose to make today a great day, even if all the external things that I think should be in place aren't where the human mind tells me it should be. But yet my heart says, hey, but everything's okay. That comes down to, again, takes you back to meditation. Meditation teaches you how to be present and live in the present moment. And I tell people there is nothing else that exists than this present moment. The past and the future don't exist, right? But how often do we sit around and beat ourselves up over decisions we made a day ago, a month ago, 10 years ago, and like none of that matters. Like it literally doesn't matter because the only thing we have is right now, right? And I tell people you can have intentions and visions for the future, but again, I go back for myself anyway. I go back to the end of the day thinking, God, I know you got a plan for me. I have a vision for, like, like I've talked to you about, like I used to have my business, but like a wellness center, a retreat center, like I have these things envisioned, but I always tell God at the end of the day, like, you show me what your will is, because at the end of the day, it could be much greater than what I'm even seeing in my mind. You know
Or
what
on the flip side, it could be on a smaller scale than what you believe, but it could be for a reason.
Yeah,
Because as long as, that's another thing is like what you were saying is don't have expectations. Because
no,
when we have expectations, we're automatically prepping ourselves for disappointment.
absolutely. It's funny. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, if you expect something of your partner, good luck, because you're going to let. You know what I'm saying? And so that's my thing, is like, I've learned that, like, and don't get me wrong, like in my last marriage, I wasn't like, I think there was definitely times that I would have these expectations. I've learned now though, like going forward, whenever if I'm married again or whatever the case is I have no expectation of the person I'm dating, because, or married to or whatever, because she may not, most of the time may not ever match or meet those things, right? And so instead of having expectations, I'm like, you just be you, and I'm gonna love you for you, and that's it, right? So there won't be like, man, you acted like this, and I thought you were gonna do that. Like, that's why you end up having like irritations and arguments and all these things, because you're expecting somebody to be a certain way, right? Instead of just saying like, I love you for all of you, even when you're in a bozo, because we're all gonna do that.
Well, then what about, so we were talking earlier about how, like, that's another thing too, is, this, what we were just talking about maybe makes me think about how, like we were talking about earlier, how you and I don't have tolerance for certain things, or like people who aren't awakened. Like when, I think what we mean is when people are trying to project their BS onto us, we're just like, no, like, no, you
Yeah,
know?
that's
So
my
that's
thing.
like a tricky, I guess that might be a little bit of a tricky concept, but it's not really tricky. It's just like, it's also important to set healthy boundaries to certain things, because you don't want, whether you're at work or at home, or out in public or whatever, you don't want someone else's. That's another thing is like we talked about this before, is that we have very rebellious spirits.
Oh yeah,
So like don't tell me what to do, you know?
absolutely.
Or like, I'm a leader, I know how to lead people, leave me alone, basically. So
Yes.
so what do you think about that concept? Like how does someone handle that in a positive way?
I handle what in a positive way?
Like
As far as,
when,
so, like, if someone's trying to project their thoughts or their views onto you.
yeah, or like trying to basically like, manipulate you, or like um influence how you do things because they think that they can do it better than you, or that they know better when you know that they don't, you
See,
know?
I think that takes me back to, again, like Wayne Dyer. What he basically taught me was like, you got to come to a place where you don't let the ego get in the way with that kind of stuff. So that's where, someone tells you, hey, like, this is my view on how you should do things, and I believe a healthy response is just like, that's interesting, and you still go about doing it the way you're going to do it, like, especially if it's working and it's effective. But there's no need, like, I never try to convince anybody to think the way I think or believe what I believe,
Right.
right? When I talk to people, and like you said, like people that that still are behind the veil, basically. I have no, like I said again, I try to have no judgment. I have nothing against it. I'm like, they are where they are on their journey, but don't tell me that I'm wrong or that I'm living in a woo-woo world because I don't look at things the way you do. You know what I mean? Because that's basically what people think. Like, "Oh, you live with your head in the clouds," and I was like, I'd rather live with my head in the clouds than my head in my ass, because you know what I'm saying? Like, because know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's like, when you're following all the bullshit of this world and you're distracted by the bullshit of this world, you're missing the greater purpose of this life. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, I don't judge people when they're like that. I'm like, that's fine. Like, but just don't come at me and tell me I'm supposed to come back down to this like 3D heavy like realm of shit when I know that all this nonsense that people get pulled into every day. I'm like, dude, that's such bullshit. You're being distracted by people that want to keep you in this like lower level of energy. And I'm like, hell no. Like I know God's leading me every day. I'm like, nah, this life is great. What are you talking about? Like things are going, I'm moving forward, life is moving forward. Doesn't mean every day is perfect, but I guarantee you though, like because I have a different view of life, I'm like, no, like this is all meant to be. Everything is exactly how it's supposed to be right now. Right? I remind myself every day, I'm like, I'm right where I'm supposed to be, even though in the human realm and the especially
In the
this
monkey
country
mind.
monkey mind, you're supposed to be at this point by this point in life, and I'm like, who the fuck are you talking to? And I'm like, people just have this misconception, and I always tell people, I was like, that like our linear timeline is not valid. It doesn't exist. I was like, that is literally a human construct. And like, because God, I see so many people that I follow that I've like followed like spiritually, where like they didn't come into their greatest calling until they were like 60. They didn't come into a certain point until not right now. Thank you. They didn't come into their greatest calling until they were much later in life.
It
You know,
happens. Everything, like you said, everything happens as when it's meant to.
divine time, man. Like I always tell people, there's a divine time for everything. And like, so just trust the fact that you're not going to always be where you think you should be or what we were taught this one timeline. And that's the other thing too, is how many people, and I've heard people tell their story, especially older folks, I've heard them tell their story and they're like, yeah, I thought I was following the American dream. They're like, and I was miserable for all these years. Like I got the degree, the home, the spouse, the blah, 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 blah. And they were like, I was miserable as shit for all these years. You know what I mean? Like they thought they were happy. And they actually like let all that go and followed their spirit. They were like, oh, no, I'm actually happy. See what I'm saying? So I tell people, follow your soul. What's your heart telling you? You know what I'm saying? What's your heart telling you that you want to do in this life?
Well,
Um, if you're a lawyer and you're like, I want to go fucking bake pies, go bake pies. You know what I'm saying? Stop doing the shit that you were told you're supposed to do, because that's a human construct. And like I tell people, like again, I'm not judging folks for that, but I mean when they do statistics and they ask all these people, and there's why is it that there's like people aren't happy in life, because you're following what someone told you you're supposed to, instead of what your heart actually told you. You want to go do this, you know?
yeah, like I think another thing too that's helped me throughout my life is actually a very simple phrase my grandfather told me when ever since I was a kid. And it's actually helped me slow down because I'm guilty of it too. I'll have times where I'm like, oh man, next week I have this, and I'll be thinking about that thing until the day comes, and I'm like, but then I remind myself. So my grandfather used to say when I joined the military, when before I went to boot camp, the best piece of advice he gave me was take it one day at a time. I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now that that's how you should live your life for your whole
Absolutely.
life. Is
Absolutely.
like you said, live in the moment. That's basically what he was telling me is
Sweet.
live in the moment.
Yep. Because that's all you have. Like, they used to ask Wayne Dyer, what are your goals for the next 5 years? He's like, he goes, I'm not a big goal person. He goes, because he goes, even when I write my books, he goes, I sit down and I have days where nothing comes through, right? He goes, so I face that blank page for multiple days. He goes, and all of a sudden, one day, this divine inspiration comes through, and bam, his book would come, right? Or a big part. And like he said, he goes, so he goes, when I learned that, he goes, I stopped going into books with outlines and all things, and I allowed it to be divinely led. That's like I've told you before. When I go into teach a meditation group, or I go into coach somebody or do whatever, I literally allow it to be divinely led every time. I always tell God, speak to me and through me. Whatever you want to come out, let it come out. Because this is not me, right? Because we think through the ego, oh, look what I did. You didn't do shit. God's the one sitting there using you to go do that. You know what I'm saying? And we want to take all the credit. And I tell people like, I'm not taking any credit. Like it was my creator that led me to do that. So and when it comes through like that, and I don't allow the ego to be in the way. It tends to be this beautiful experience for the people I'm with. Uh, Half the time I don't even know what the hell I said. Seriously, people will ask me like, "You remember that group we had like 2 months ago?" And you said, "I'm like, I don't remember what I said." Like, and I don't, and I'm like, that's okay because it just flowed out, and I'm grateful for that because I believe that that's literally what intended to be in this life. See, but again, it goes back to all these people thinking we're supposed to be in this ego mind, the intellect. I mean, you wonder why we have such a fucking issue in this country or in the world, not this country, in the world, because you have all these people trying to live out of their head instead of their heart. If people live from their heart, dude, we wouldn't have half the garbage that goes on. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can relate that to the whole push for every kid to go to college. And then once you're in that, when I was in that realm of things, and I found out through working that way, I was not in a role where I was pushing people to go to college. I was just trying to help people be able to pay for their college if that's what their goal was.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found out was, and this is just an example of how we're programmed, right? You could talk about the school system. So schools get federally funded
Yeah.
and they get more money, like even high schools get more money for how many people they send to college, basically. And then, of course, colleges, like that's what we were talking about. Like you talk about pharmaceuticals, you talk about the pharmaceuticals as a business. The medical field in the United States is a fucking business, right? So they don't want to heal people. They just want to band-aid the problem so you don't get cured, but you keep spending money.
Oh
It's the
yeah.
same thing. It's the same thing with education.
Yep.
Like if you like think about the world that we would have if everyone was able to focus on what they love to do and their strengths
Mm-hmm.
rather than what society or a teacher or a parent tells them what they need to do with their life. You know?
100%, man. Yep. Whatever you're gifted with and you're passionate about was given to you in this lifetime, right? For this lifetime. And
That's like your gift.
yeah, when you follow and use those gifts, A, you wonder why you're things naturally. Yes, you still got to in on it, perfect it, but you wonder why it comes pretty natural to you. B, you wonder why you really enjoy it because it's a gift that's given to you, right? It's like when I coach people, whether it's mentally, physically, or spiritually, like, it comes very natural to me, and I love it. Like I don't feel like working. I don't feel like any of that when I'm coaching people to help them improve in the way they've asked me. It's me. It's like this is amazing, and then I do it for anybody to tell me, hey, I'm glad I learned this, but it's wonderful. Sometimes when I get a random message or what, like you really helped me, like thank you, or whatever. It's like it was God used me, but God used me as a tool to help you. But I'm grateful that it did benefit you, right? And that to me is like right, and it's like I said, but we're told to go to college and go get these. And perfect example. At a working with certain physicians, you'd see these physicians that were so miserable, these ER docs that were so miserable, and there was times where I had good friends. I remember telling, I was like, "You hate what you do," and I caught him off guard, and I was just like, "You don't like what you do?" He's like, "No, not really." I was like, "Why are you doing it?" Well, I was told by my family to go to school and become a doctor, and I was like, "Dude, it's not about what your family wants you to do; it's what your heart want to do." You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
And then that's why people end up unhappy because they follow this, they work years and years to accomplish something that they didn't even want to do, and then they're stuck in it and they have no other skill set because that's what they've been programmed to do. And like that's why, like when I joined the military, I had every my teachers were like you because I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really apply myself that much in school because I thought a lot of it was bullcrap.
Yeah, so did I.
Especially when you get that senioritis and you're like whatever
Mm-hmm.
but but I had teachers and even some family members like don't join the military blah 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 whatever, and I'm like I was at a point in my life where I was like, well, I don't want to go to another 4 years of school right now. Like I'm done with that crap. I don't want to sit in a classroom for the next 4 years again. Like, no, I want to go do cool stuff. And they told me, they're like, no, don't. Like, I had one of my English teacher actually was like, don't do it. You know, this is what's going to happen, blah, 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 all this negative stuff. Did I listen to him? No, because I knew in my heart that's what I want. That at the time, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
And I'm glad that I did it because I wouldn't be I wouldn't be as much like everything that you do in life, you'll have obstacles. So as many obstacles as I've overcome, I wouldn't be the person I am now if I never would have done that. Because I feel like I wouldn't have as much of an insight spiritually if I never would have been around that environment. And I wouldn't have the knowledge I have now. Because like we said, everything happens for a reason. And that's why we're talking about manifestation, meditation, and our thoughts and our words, because you know what you speak out and what you think about, what consumes your thoughts controls your life. So if you're negative, it's going to be negative. If you're positive, then you'll have positive outcomes and a positive journey, so to speak. That doesn't mean you're not going to have bumps in the road, but like you also have to be able to, like, I think we've said this before, but I can't harp on it enough, is that you have to be able to think for yourself.
absolutely.
Like that's why, like we talk about this like every episode, but we talk about the television. Like it's a television. It's telling you what to think and
Absolutely.
it's telling you what to believe. But a lot of people don't take the time to be like, is that really the case? You know? Or
Absolutely.
or what about this? We've our society has been fostered into like a corner where it's like no one can question anything anymore, because if you do, you're a racist or you're a homophobe or you're a xenophobe or whatever. And it's like, no, I'm just questioning this because it doesn't make sense and it doesn't feel right, you know?
And that's the whole thing. That's 100% truth, man. Is like you should always be able to question things.
Even
When some,
question if you're
when some,
watching this video, right now, you can question what we're talking about
absolutely.
for
And
yourself.
I always tell people, like, when I teach something, whether it be like about, meditation, manifestation, whatever, I'm like, don't just take my word for it. Go look into what I'm telling you. If I tell you about studies, like when I hold groups with like meditation groups and things like that, like I will tell people like things that I've studied and learned. And then I tell people, like, don't just listen to me, you go look into it, and you're going to see that I actually did do my studies and my work to figure these things out. And then I obviously practice these things, and I see the actual ramification of me doing these practices. But that's the thing. Yeah, it's like you said, but like, question things, because I mean, yeah, like you said, it's amazing to me. Like people will, it's it goes into like, and don't even get me on all that stuff, but it goes into like government and all that, where people, I tell people, the only reason certain things exist or everything exists, a lot of this stuff exists, is because we literally have agreed upon doing it. Like I tell people, so if we want to make change in the world, then let's stop agreeing upon the bullshit they've told us that we're supposed to be following. I was just having this conversation the other day. I was like, the only reason that these systems and these things exist is because a bunch of us were just like, okay, we'll do it. What the fuck are you talking about? No, question it and be like, this is stupid. This system's ignorant. This system's stupid. Why are we doing it still? Let's start standing together and say, this doesn't make sense anymore. Why are we still living like this? Why are we supposed to live this way? Because the government said, or because this religion said, or because, like you said, the school said. Like I said, that was the other thing I was having that conversation the other day. I said, isn't it amazing how each soul is very different, but yet people try to make us conform day in and day out, right? Whether it's the government, religion, schools, whatever. Like, let's make everybody the same. The hell are we all going to be the same for? Imagine how boring this world would be.
Well,
I like the fact.
because it's about control.
I know. That's what I'm
That's
saying.
everything is encompassed around control.
Yep.
So like even in school or work, like, oh, you have to abide by all these policies and you have to do all this stuff and like follow all these rules. It's like, okay, rules were meant to be broken, motherfucker. Like
people all the time. Like I read Wayne Dyer's book. It's Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, living by the wisdom of the Tao. And he has the Tao in there. And then he like kind of like puts a few pages of what because he lived the Tao for a year. And dude, the Tao makes so much sense to me. And that's exactly what Lao Tzu, the writer of the Tao, said, is that basically the more rules that are made, the more rule breakers we create, right? And it's so true because we're not intended to live in a box of rules. And that's why, like you and I were saying, I my whole life, when people constantly try to tell me like you need to do like this, you need to do that, I'm just like, dude, leave me the fuck alone. Like, let me be myself. You know what I mean? And I will always get things done. I will always, and I obviously I love people. Like I'm always trying to do the best for what's best for all, but not in a sense of like, I got to follow all these rules to do it. Just
Yeah,
let me.
because if you're in an environment where if you're in an environment where it's just like with work, if you're in an environment where every part of your day is controlled by somebody else, then you're not going to perform to the highest level that you can because you're controlled.
Absolutely.
Whereas if the I mean, for lack of a better term, if the leash was loosened a little, you'd be like, all right, I have discretion on this, or I can make this decision, or I can do this in this way. And then like the magical thing about that is when you allow people to flow in that way, things work out 10 times better than they would if rather than if they followed all the policies and the rules and all this other stuff. Like again, as long as they're not like lighting those stuff on fire or something, but like if you allow people to play on their strengths, and what they're passionate about and what speaks to their soul, then every business in the world would be freaking amazing, you
Yeah.
know?
Everything would flourish. Is That's exactly it. Like I said, when I still had my business, and I used to tell you this when we were working together, you saw the way I did things when I ran stuff. It's like I allow people to be who they are, right? I know that we're all grown and we're gonna do what we know we were put here to do. Um, and I just let people, like you just said, like play off their strengths and what they're good at, and be who they are and bring their unique flair, because that's what makes the environment amazing.
Well, that's exactly what we talked about with this podcast is that people appreciate authenticity.
Yes.
And if you're not playing off of what you love, then you're not being authentic.
No, not at all. Exactly. Because think about it. The other day I just made this video because I was like, man, people, why do people applaud people for people being fake, for being who they aren't, right? Like, for a fact this person isn't that who they are, and like who they're saying they are. Like if it's somebody personally, and like they could have just had a conversation with you an hour ago telling you how miserable they are, and then they get on social media and take a picture and they're like, look at me, my life is wonderful. And I'm like, dude, you just told me 5 minutes ago that you hate everything about life. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, stop applauding people for the bullshit, and let's start loving people for being authentic. You know what I mean? And that's also like you're saying, like our podcast, like being authentically who we are. Even though we may not fit the mold of what everybody wants us to be, we're not supposed to fit any mold. No one is, you
If
know?
everybody, that's the thing is that there would never be any trailblazers is if everybody just adhered to what they were told.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. I had a client that told me that years ago. She was older too. She was in her 70s, and she goes, "You, my friend, are what we call a trailblazer." And I was just like, kind of started laughing when she said it. She goes, "I'm serious." She goes, "You don't care what other people think." I was like, "I don't." I was like, "I used to." I was like, "But I don't anymore." I was like, "Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I do. There's still going to be people against me." It's like we were talking about earlier. So guess what? I'm going to authentically be myself. And just like we are talking about, you said somebody had made a comment on that stuff, or earlier, and I'm like, hey, you know what, sorry that we don't fit your mold, but really I don't give a shit because I don't want to fit your mold. you know so don't hate because we're being ourselves and doing what our hearts are telling us to do, and you're probably over there doing what fucking some other person told you need to go live this way. Okay, high five. You're living a fucking shitty existence if that's if you can't be yourself. You know what I mean? In my opinion. And like, not judging you. If you're happy with that, go for it. But my thing is like, I think we're all here to be ourselves. Ultimately, we're all here to be unique. You know, that's
Yeah,
why we.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. That's why, like, you know, for like this episode, that's why we wanted to talk about manifestation and meditation and how we all have the power, because a lot of people don't realize the power that they have.
Yeah,
Like a lot of people aren't aware because they've never been taught, or maybe they tried and they've been discouraged by others. But you can't allow external influences to dictate what you do every minute of the day, because
exactly.
you're never gonna become your true self, and you're never gonna be able to step into your own power until you start internalizing and realize that you are the master of all of your problems and you're the master of all your solutions, you know? I
Absolutely.
mean, and I put it that way because a lot of people think about life with, oh, assets and liabilities or problems and solutions or, whatever. So, like, but it's deeper. What I'm saying is it's deeper than that, because if that's why we were talking about, um, like when people are overly analytical or logical, they have a lack of faith, because faith is a very powerful thing, and
Oh yeah.
not just in like a biblical standpoint, but just in general. You're like, oh, I need to buy this, I need to move here and purchase this house, or I need to get this job, or I need to get this degree, and maybe that's what maybe that's what that person really wants. But if you don't have faith in any of it, it's going to be a much harder road.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I really, I think I feel like I do my best just internally to live by faith every day, just trusting that everything's working out just the way it's supposed to. Because I do truly believe that everything's always working out for our highest good. I just tell people, it's like Albert Einstein said, do we live in a do you believe you live in a friendly or a unfriendly universe, right? It's truly your option. And I tell people, like, I believe we have a friendly universe. Like, the universe is always working on my behalf. God's always working on my behalf. Like, not just for me, for the collective, for the greater good of all. But like, I do believe that everything's always working out for my highest good, right? So if I try to go for this position and I don't get it, well, guess what? I wasn't supposed to. If I, think I'm supposed to be in this relationship, but God's like, no, that's not for you. I was just protected. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way I look at it. I'm like, because I look at, like, God's always like, hey, if you're telling me to lead you every day, you're telling me to put you right where you're supposed to be, then I'm going to also keep you out of where you're not supposed to be. Right.
yeah, like we said, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah,
And
there's nothing that, like, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Like, yeah, I don't think there is. So,
no, no, no. When I was younger, I was like, oh, that's a coincidence.
mhm.
But when something happens and you're like, that's a coincidence, what you don't realize what you're doing is you're discounting the lesson that you're supposed to be learning. And
Yeah,
you're discounting your own power, and you're discrediting God, because God puts things in our path for a reason, no matter what it is. It could be something as horrible as the death of a child. It could be something like, oh, I lost my job, or oh, but everything happens for a reason, because we talk about reincarnation. Our souls are here to learn certain lessons, like what we were talking about, and what I was talking about earlier is that I believe I was put here to help people, and you believe the same thing, is like to help people heal, to heal the world, and to help people awaken to what we truly are. We're not just these like freaking monkeys with freaking money,
exactly. No, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, I 100%. Like, I always believe, and I've always felt. I just wasn't sure why, but I do believe that I'm here to help people just, awaken to who they truly are, and to be better and better, and to, like you said, like, awaken to their true power and who they really are, in every aspect. Because that's why I sit with clients a lot of times. Like, one of my clients I have in North Carolina, and her and I, we FaceTime 3 days a week, and I train her, but then we end up having these long, deep conversations afterwards. And it's like, I tell her, I'm like, just understand, like, like, life is literally leading you every moment. So, like, she was going for a certain position, and I was like, you weren't supposed to be in that. I go, you're actually being protected from that. But that's the thing, is like, I try to tell people, like you said, is like, we were put here, you and I were put here. It's like, that whole term light workers, warriors of light. Why is our podcast Warriors of Light? Because it's like, we literally, I believe we were put here to like to bring light to the world. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just sitting back. That's why we are different. That's why we always have felt different. That's why we do things our own way. Because if we were just to follow the crowd, for lack of a better word, just follow the crowd, um, how would we make any kind of difference?
Dude,
Right?
if everyone followed the crowd, if every single person followed the crowd right now, we'd all be enslaved.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
like if you want to break that down to the monkey mind, like that's the worst case, well, not the worst case, maybe, because the worst case might be death, I don't know, or genocide. But like if everyone just listened to what information they were told and didn't ever question it and didn't ever follow their heart or what they believe, then we'd already be done for.
Absolutely. I always tell people, you're talking about trailblazers. The people that have made a difference on this, when they've come to their, to different lifetimes, like you said, we our souls have been here many times, but when the people that make a difference are the ones that are still talked about, like Jesus, like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King, like these people who came in with a bigger vision, and they knew people were gonna basically not like them and talk shit. They didn't care. They were like, I know I'm here, so I'm gonna do it anyway, right? um and that's literally how I feel. Like, I know like why I'm here. I know I'm here to like spread that light and spread that love, and to shift, help people shift if they want to shift. Um but guess what? People aren't gonna like me. I'm okay with that, because I
Yeah,
don't follow. I don't follow what, hey, this is what's normal. This is that's the other thing, is like, the more I've shifted over these years, you know people will always want to be like, but remember who you were before? Like, I don't give a shit. If you're not evolving and growing, then what are you doing? Like, and I'm not saying that, you're supposed to be better. I'm not better than anybody, but I know that I'm different, and I think different, and I look at this life differently than I did even a few years ago,
yeah, man.
you
That's
know?
why, we were talking about earlier, like the year of the dragon. Like this is the year. Like when I texted you earlier, I'm like, this is the year, and I felt it too.
Mhm.
I'm like, this is the year where I step into my power and like just make things happen and follow my heart and my soul, because that's what that's what's being spoken to me, for lack of a better term, to do, you know?
Absolutely.
And like,
Absolutely.
um man, like that's when we're talking about people who are naysayers and haters and all this stuff, dude, that's just, they say, there's like a saying where it's like, if you're being positive and you're living your life and people are trying to bring you down, that's just their own demons,
Absolutely.
you know?
It's like that one saying, like I've seen it several times, where it says, you're just upset because my spirit irritates your demons.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
And that's all it is, man. It's like, when we're positive, and we're, again, like I said earlier, oh, you're living with your head in the clouds. That's okay. I'd rather do that than be pessimistic and negative, and oh, this and that, and no, I'd rather look at life and be like, oh, life's beautiful. Yeah, doesn't mean I don't have days where I'm just like, damn, what's going on? Of course I do. But the simple fact is like, I choose in that moment, those days, to say, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be learning something from this situation. I'm supposed to be, there's a lesson in everything, a blessing and lesson in everything, because lessons are blessings too, because you're growing. And our souls come here to the school of earth to grow, you
Right.
know?
That's exactly what we're talking about with the, like, and yet again, meditation is one of those tools you can use. Like you were saying, like when you have days you're like, holy shit, what's going on? Why is my life all fucked up right now? But that's where meditation comes in.
Hmm.
That's where going out into nature comes in.
Yep.
That's where prayer comes in. When you're just like, all right, let me slow down, because a lot of what people do is they spiral, one inconvenience happens, and then it just spirals for the whole day, like, oh, I spilled my coffee, oh, I am in traffic, oh, and like everything just sucks, and then you're manifesting it, and you don't even realize that you're manifesting your own doom.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Wayne Dyer said that. He's like, he said, he used to say, he goes, when you start to understand how powerful your thoughts are, you start to become very careful about what you think about, and it's true, because I mean, I find myself, if I have a moment of my mind wanting to go on to something goofy, I'll pull it back real quick, whether it's
Oh
with a
yeah.
mantra. Like, I'll use a mantra in my mind over and over until I just, restart that positivity, and all of a sudden it's gone, because I'm like, I'm not going to fall into that hole, and then, like you said, turn my whole day, week, month, whatever into negativity. Why? Like, you had a moment. That's the human aspect of this life. You're going to have moments like that. But again, we're programmed to believe, that's the other thing, is the false comfort. We're programmed to believe that everything's supposed to be flowing perfectly all the time. And I tell people, I'm like, that's, how would you learn? How would you ever learn if everything was always just perfect, right?
Yeah, if everything was perfect all the time, you're never going to learn your lesson.
Yeah, you'll never learn anything. And so I tell people, like, of course we want things to be good more than not. And that's a good is different to everybody, right? But I tell people, but at the same time, like, when you're going through something that appears to be difficult, that's, again, like you said, with meditations, you sit back. I sit back and I'll go into a meditation. I'm looking at the day and I'm like, all right, what am I supposed to learn from this? And I'll go in and I get quiet and I go inside, and then I start to, I have like revelations all the time where I'm just like, oh, damn, that's what I'm supposed to be learning from that. You know, um, when I went through this divorce, like, this last divorce, it made me really realize, I'm like, wow, it made me self-reflect a lot and look at my part in relationships. Instead of like pointing at other people, I pointed at myself, and I was like, what are you doing that's not great in a relationship, right? And so that whole experience showed me where I was fucking up. You know what I mean? And that's why I say, in this life, when you're going through a challenge, it's because it's trying to teach you something. So why don't you slow down and self-reflect? What do people mostly do? They fall into victim mentality, or they point fingers at other people. It's
Exactly.
it's them. No, 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 no. I always tell people, when people start telling me this shit, I'm like, no, 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 wait a minute. It's like my kids, anybody. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Look at yourself. What are you doing that's causing this? You know what I'm saying? Oh no, it's the other person. Okay, but what are you doing? There's got to be something with you too. You know, and that's what I've learned with myself, is when something's going shitty, instead of pointing at other people, I just look at myself and I'm like, well, how can you make this situation better?
Well,
And
dude, that's exactly what we were talking about. You could take that same concept and apply it to the media, right?
yeah,
You're only getting one side of the story. Whatever you see on the television is what they want you to see. But what are they not? What you got to think about? What are they not showing you?
absolutely, absolutely,
It applies to everything. Like there's always two sides to a story.
yes,
With whether it's a car accident, whether it's an argument at home, whether it's an inconvenience at work, there's always two sides, man. And a lot of people just focus on their side and they never consider what else is going on, you know?
100%. It's funny. I just had that conversation a few days ago. I said, the one thing I've learned to do with people is, when people, whether they get mad at me, they talk shit, do whatever, right? Whatever the situation is, I slow down enough to look at them and just, I wonder what's going on in their life, right? Instead of just talking shit about them and getting mad at them and whatever, I'm like, I wonder why they're acting like this with me. There's got to be some internal battle, something's going on,
Oh yeah.
you know? Um, because I always tell people, like, if you're projecting shit out on other people, it's because you have your own battle that you're not dealing with. Because once you start to take ownership of your life and of all your shit, you don't have time to point at other people, because you're just looking at yourself and you're like, shit, look at me.
And yeah, we're talking about this, but for those of you watching, we're not trying to claim that in any way is this quote unquote an easy thing, right?
No,
This takes what me and Brian are talking about right now takes years of work. And often, like for my example, um, I'll think back on it once I've learned my lesson. I'm like, oh, that thing that happened 10 years ago makes a lot of sense now because this is what I was doing, you know?
absolutely. Can't you look back and connect the dots and things now?
Oh, dude. Oh my God. It's kind of scary, actually. It's kind of scary because I'm like, because the idea of fate and destiny, right? It's like, are we all living in a thing that's planned out and we kind of like aren't aware of it, you know? Because because when you realize these things and you start to awaken, you're like, holy crap, like that's
Well, you
why it
think,
happened. That's why I went through that. That's why these mistakes kept being happened, because it's about the law. It's kind of like the law of karma and the laws of reincarnation. It's like if you live a like when you live this life, this might not be your last one here if you
yeah.
don't learn all your lessons. So that's what made me think. It's like wow, we're really. I really do, like you said, I really do believe the earth is kind of like a school for souls so that we can learn, and then only those who have learned can ascend, you know?
Well, yeah, I think I think we're all ascending, but I think at the same time, it's like, you ascend that much faster as you learn the lessons, right? So it's like the concept I keep hearing on a regular basis now is that we're kind of like we're in this like video game. It's like it's almost like a video game, right? It's
Like a
Maya.
matrix.
Yeah, it's a matrix. It's a matrix. It's a Maya. It's an illusion. Um, and yeah, we all are here to learn whatever it is we came to learn in this lifetime. And like you said, it's like, I think every time I equate it to, okay, I learned this lesson, now I level up, right? Um, and and the more I level up, the more I see life more clearly. And then you also look at things that I used to hold on to in life, and you're like, wait a minute, why was I letting that be so heavy upon me? Like when that's not that, dude. It's a fucking game. I mean, and we're here learning and growing. So it's like, okay, I learned this, and now I get to go forward. Oh, I learned the next lesson. Now I get to go forward. That's why I slowed down enough. And like you said just a few minutes ago, it takes years of work. I mean, dude. I mean, I'm still, of course, working on. We'll always be working. It's eternal work, but I'm always working on myself. But it took years for me to be able to slow down enough to sit down and be like, wait a minute, what are you supposed to be learning from this situation, man? You know what I mean? And to also listen to my soul. Like when my soul tells me something, instead of me living out of the head, like I said, out of the intellect, I listen to my soul, I listen to my heart. And so like when there's a situation like now, I think about like I've told you many times before, like relationships were like a big struggle for me. You know what I mean? Because I just it was always like I was trying to do my best in a relationship, but it seemed like I would always mess it up. Well, now I've learned so much out of it, especially this last marriage taught me a lot. And so now even when I just date somebody, like I can hear my soul tell me immediately, like, nope, she's not it. I'm like, all right, cool. And like immediately I'm done. I'm like, nope, like, it doesn't mean I won't be your friend, doesn't mean we can't hang out and be friends. Like, cool, no problem. But this is not going anywhere like on a romantic level. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Um,
now that you mentioned that, that makes me think, I want to tell the audience, like, what Brian just said, a lot of people will take that and be like, oh, that person's a bad person or that person's a good person. And some people are so black and white about everything. But as you start to awaken, you realize there's a hell of a lot of gray.
oh, dude,
Nothing
100.
is not very few things in life are cut and dry.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. That is so much, there's so much truth to that. I always tell people when people say, like, again, what we said, like, to like your kind of quote unquote path to enlightenment, when people say there's only one way to do things, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. I don't mean to judge you, but no, there's fucking many ways to do shit. You know what I mean? Because, like you said, that gray area is where we're intended to be, right? We're intended to have that healthy balance. That's why I try to tell people, too, you have the
Exactly. That's what I was about to say, man. Balance.
it's a
Exactly.
healthy balance, man. Like it's just like so like right now like you're having a beer. Think about like I don't know how many people, and I have nothing against this. Like everybody has their own way of looking at things, but you have like many people who will say like you're spiritual. Why would you have a drink? Well, it doesn't mean you can't have a drink if you're spiritual. I mean, if it's ruling your freaking life and you have to wake up in the morning and fucking pound a shot, then yeah, there's probably something you need to look at, right? But if you like to have drinks and hang out, like or whatever the case is, I mean, I personally don't find that like like a wrong thing. But at the same time, you also have to look again. It's a balance. If you overdo it, which don't get me wrong, there's times where I definitely overdo it. I get into that mode where I go too much on it. Having a good time with people and like woohoo, the night takes itself. But honestly, like I mean, I think that there is a healthy balance of everything. It's you have we are souls having a human experience, and the thing is in that human experience you come and you experience things, right, with our senses. So we come here and we experience different things. um so I tell people there truly is a healthy balance in every aspect of this life.
Oh yeah.
For
Like I'll be honest, I had a problem with alcohol for a long time and I didn't even realize it. But
Hmm.
now, because of everything I went through, and those were maybe the lessons I had to learn. And now, I'm just like, all right, I'll have a couple beers and I'm fine, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm a super spiritual, but what I'm trying to say is because of the, uh, I guess, I don't feel like I'm completely enlightened yet, just personally, but I feel like I'm way ahead of where I used to be.
Oh
But
yeah, absolutely.
because of the spiritual journey and the lessons I learned and the path that I've been on, now I have a healthy relationship with like alcohol or with other stuff. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to now, but I had to go through learning my lessons, like when I had to do therapy for freaking PTSD, and I realized like, oh shit, maybe I am burying some stuff that I experienced, and I never freaking talked about it, and I just instead of like, because a lot of people are for multiple reasons are either afraid or maybe they don't even realize because a lot of trauma responses is like I had memories that came back to me when I did therapy that I actually forgot about. Like
Hmm.
I guess my as a defense mechanism or a trauma mechanism, my body just like blocked that memory out. And then as I was doing therapy, I realized, and by the way, therapy is completely okay. So,
Absolutely.
um, but if I never would have gone through therapy, I would not have realized like, oh shit, I was using alcohol as that external force to solve the problem that I wasn't acknowledging, right?
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I had I guess for lack of a better term, you could call it demons or whatever. But then that's kind of like what clicked in my mind I heard, as soon as I went through therapy and kind of like went through that, I'm like, oh, and then I started to like, meditation and prayer and like seeking
Hmm.
spiritual guidance. I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like now that it allows you to fully acknowledge whatever problems you're having in your life. And then if you still enjoy it, you can still utilize those things, but in a healthier manner, you know?
Yes. Not in a sense of burying things, like you said. No, 100%. I mean, I think definitely for sure I've had periods in my life where, I would use same thing. I would use, drinking beer, whatever, to numb out something that I felt like wasn't going the way I wanted it to be going. Right. And now I'm very aware of that. I'm like, like, do I have fun hanging out with people and having drinks and talking and laughing? Yeah, of course. But at the same time, like I'm like, if I have a day where something doesn't seem like it's going quote unquote the way I thought it's supposed to go, um, I especially those days won't have a drink because I'm like, why would I? Because I know that that's all that is going to be, oh, I'm using this to mask the day that I think is not going the way it should have gone. Right.
Dude, but
So,
that's a prime example of what we're talking about where we have power,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So like
Yeah.
for example with alcohol, it no longer has power over me.
Hmm.
I didn't go to AA or anything like that. I did therapy for PTSD, but like but now instead of trying to fill a void within myself with an external thing,
Hmm.
but now like for example, now that alcohol has no hold over me. Where before, because I realized, like I told my wife the other day, like I feel like I've evolved and in a lot of ways, but I'll use alcohol as an example. Like I would go to the store and be like, "Oh, I'm in the beer aisle. Oh, I got to get beer." It was just like a thing. And now,
Automatic.
yeah, because that's what's dangerous because you don't realize that you're addicted to something. That's why I have more empathy now for people who have addictions
Hmm.
because I feel like a lot of the times people just kind of fall into it without realizing it. Where we were talking about before how people are so judgmental and yada yada, but it's like if you just took a second to think about maybe that person went through something and
Yeah.
they don't have another way, they don't have the only way they think they can handle it is with that addiction. But what they didn't realize is that they just fell into it and now they can't stop. So it's like now, wow, it's kind of crazy that I'm talking about this because it's a prime example. And then now I can go and be like, all right, I'm not going to get beer for like this month or whatever. I don't care. I don't need it. So now it's not a crutch, it's just something I enjoy. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of people who have addictions, they're not given the light of day to either get the help that they need, or to hear what we just talked about. Because by sharing that experience, maybe someone else can see this and be like, "Oh, that's a good way of looking at it." Because
Absolutely.
like for example, when I got back from Afghanistan, I didn't realize it. My dad was like, "You changed," and I had been home for like a couple days, dude. I had went home on leave, and I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "All right, Dad, I didn't change. What are you talking about?" And he's like, "You changed," because my dad is also, like I told you before, my grandfather and my dad. I think that's kind of where I get it from, is that they're very intuitive and they're I believe that they're very spiritually connected,
Mhm.
and my dad picked up on it immediately. He's like, "You changed." I was like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean I changed?" And I just kind of like discounted it, and I was like, "Whatever." And then years later, I'm like, "Oh shit, he was
Yeah.
right."
Yeah. Absolutely. The thing is, though, is like you said, you've evolved and you've identified it, man. And that's the thing is, that's the same thing with me. Again, like, I've looked at myself in many aspects of things in the past that I would say, like, oh no, I don't, I'm not using that for that. I'm not doing these things, and it's like, then like the more I've grown and I look within myself and I'm like, shit, maybe there has been times when I've used drinking for this or, whatever it is, that like, for me, it's usually been drinking. It was women, it was, these different things that were like giving me validation or covering things up. And now I'm like, like I don't need external validation. I don't need these external things. Like you said, if I have a drink, I do like I'll enjoy having a drink, but I don't need it to supposedly make me feel better because I gotta tell people like if I'm not dealing with the things that I have in front of me, then how am I actually going to be able to learn the lessons I'm intended to learn in this life,
You
right?
know
Because
what? You know
from them.
what? You know what? My dad actually, you just made me think. What that's like that man. This is kind of creepy. It's kind of like a synchronicity almost, because my dad said this about one of my family members. But his words, I never forgot what he said. He was like, "If you run away from your problems, you're never going to solve anything."
Yeah, absolutely. Because you won't, because you'll literally think about it. You'll run, you know something's going on, you feel it, um, you run from it, whether it's and that what you were talking about, like with addiction. Like, think about how many people don't even realize they're addicted to their phone,
Oh
they're
yeah.
addicted to TV, they're addicted to
Or
drama,
food. It could be food.
they're addicted to food, they're addicted to sex, whatever it is, right? Like, and the thing is like we all, that's that human, that monkey mind that looks for that comfort that gives us that quick dopamine hit, and this is going to make me feel better, and I'm not going to have to think about whatever it is for the moment. And I got to tell people, like, like, believe me, I've done that. And all it does is it keeps coming back, and then when it comes back with a vengeance, because it's like, shit, now it's doubled. Like, you think about times where you woke up hungover, and that problem that you were running from is now tenfold because now you physically feel like shit, your energy level's low, and now you still have the same thoughts going through your head, right? So you say you have the same problem, but it's now magnified because you've done this other shit that now you also feel bad about. You wake up and you're like, why did I drink so much yesterday? Damn it. And right. And then now you feel bad about that plus the problem that you had before.
Well,
And
it's
that's what,
interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because that's not the first time I've heard that, because I have been, the concept that, they call alcohol spirits,
yeah.
right? Like, oh, there's a reason for that, because I've experienced it myself. I've lived it. Like, I do believe that if you abuse any substance or anything, especially alcohol, specifically like alcohol, you're, like you said, you're lowering your vibration. And what happens? We're spiritual beings, and like we talked about earlier, what you put out, what you're giving off, comes back to you.
Mhm.
So you're, like, for example, with alcohol, you're attracting, lower vibrating entities to influence shit that you never would do when you're sober.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the
So
thing. that's one thing that I do question, like, and that's why, like, again, I don't mind having a beer or whatever, but my thing is sometimes I still question it because I'm like we've talked, you and I've talked about this before too, is like, it lowers your energy. We're all made of energy, right? And I know, like, it was, can't remember who made the scale, but I know, like, Dr. David Hawkins talked about it in Power versus Force, and talks about, like, I have the book Power versus Force, and he talks about these things that, like, keep you on a lower level. Well, alcohol is one of them. Different drugs are those things. They keep you on this lower vibration, and so for me, it's not, they don't keep you there, but when you're using them, right? And for me, I realize, like, when I'm truly, like, just to be completely honest, when I'm 100% sober and I'm like fucking rolling and life is flowing, I'm like, man, like, I feel like my energy's through the roof. Like, everything is just going. You know what I mean? And then I'll take a day where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go have some drinks with, have some fun or whatever with some friends or whatever. And then it's like all of a sudden, literally, like, it'll just, like, not that I won't have fun in that moment and my energy may be up in that moment, but I swear sometimes, not always, but sometimes the next day, it's like my energy doesn't feel like it was before I did that. You know what I'm saying? So I got to bring myself back up. And so sometimes I question it. I'm like, is it even worth it? Because, like, I'd rather just be flowing and have my energy up all the time and just be rocking and rolling, and I'm not judging it one way or the other. It's just more like, I just like having that flow of life, like flowing with the universe. Let's go.
Well, you see what you said it. You just said it. You acknowledged it, right? Once you're that's what we're talking about this whole episode is once you're awakened, once you're aware of certain things, you're like, oh, you know, this is how, like, because I've had the same thing where now, like, I made people can talk about New Year's resolutions all they want, but I made this year about focusing on my health. So, like, I'm working out a heck of a lot more. My nutrition, I'm on like a meal plan, so it's dialed down. Uh, and like I feel great most of the time. And the
Yep.
same thing when I have some beers, I'm like, oh shit, like fuck, now I'm bloated and I feel like crap. But
Yep.
at the same time, I'm working it off. I make sure I'm still working out. I'm still getting nutrients into my body because, like, in the 2 episodes ago when we're talking about health, like focusing, like, that's another thing we talked about before, is as a society our health is jacked up because of the food we consume. It's not, a lot of it's processed, a lot of it's jacked up. So,
Stress, huge thing.
but yeah, I've had the same experience where I'll notice, I'm like, oh, I had some beers yesterday, that's why I feel a little off right now, you
Mm-hmm.
know as opposed to when I have days or weeks when I'm completely healthy and working out and getting the proper nutrients and water. I'm like, oh, I feel fucking amazing. So yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I have extended periods where I'm just like, I mean, I work out usually 6 days a week. And then, of course, like, I'll do 24 to 48 hour fasts, like, usually a couple times a month. I watch what I'm doing, like, and I don't have any kind of, alcohol or anything like that. I feel amazing. Like I said, I always tell people, like, do I enjoy having some beers with people? Of course I do. I really, that's just the honest truth. But I go back and forth in myself saying, like, is it worth it? Because, like, think about how you feel when you don't do any of that and you're just rocking and rolling. Like, life is just flowing. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, I'm not judging that stuff by any means. Um, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just more of, like, what is it that really makes you feel like a champ all the time? And like I said, when I'm on, I'm meditating daily, which I do, work out all the time, reading, journaling, doing my stuff. Like, I feel like, praying, of course. I feel like I'm at my peak when I'm doing those things. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, man. That's like, if you compare it to an athlete, as a human, like we talked about before, we exist on different planes of existence at all times. But when
Hmm.
we have health in the spirit and the intellect and in the physical realm, you're flowing, like you're, if you're healthy in all three of those things, you're fucking great, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But
So,
yeah,
yeah.
no, yeah. I think, just to, like, kind of sum up the whole, just like we were talking about meditation and manifestation and mindfulness, it's just putting it out there for people. I highly recommend everybody. Um, take on a meditation practice. Start with 10 minutes a day minimum, and close your eyes, either just in silence or with some meditation music on. I always recommend 528 hertz, and I tell people 10 minutes a day, and yes, your mind's going to bounce around. That's okay. Let your mind do what it's going to do. Just when the thoughts come, I tell people, like, almost let it be like passing clouds. Don't grasp onto the thought. Just let them come and go, come and go, come and go. Eventually you will get to a place where in your meditation practice, your mind will become a lot more quiet. I have moments where it's very, very silent and it's so peaceful. I'm just in a whole nother place. I don't feel my body. It just feels amazing. But then I have days, and I've been meditating for several years now, but I have days where I sit down to meditate and my mind just will not shut off,
Well, I
but
think,
I don't,
do you use visualization?
I do. Usually the first, I don't know, first 5-10 minutes of it, I will visualize if there's something specific that I want to see, like myself doing, or something that I want to focus on manifesting. I will visualize that. Um, but what I've also learned with that is that visualization is powerful. But I also realize, like, as you speak things out and you journal things, like I would say I script things out, like, thank you God, this, for life being like blah 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 blah, in the present tense, like if everything is already the way I personally would love to see it. Um, and but then I don't hold on to it. Like, that's the big thing too, is like I tell people, I think that's why a lot of people don't see manifestation come to fruition, is because people put things out to the universe and then they're like holding so tightly to it, like, is it gonna happen, is it gonna happen, is it gonna happen? And it's like,
Yeah,
no, put
because
it
they
out
don't
there.
because they don't have any faith in it.
Yeah, I just put it out there and I let it go. I'm like, all right, off we go, and I'm like, and I always tell God, I'm like, whenever and however you do that, that's up to you. You have infinite ways of doing things, so I don't need to know how or when it's going to happen. And it's funny, I had this thought the other day. I was thinking, I was like, it's actually exciting in life because we don't know what's going to happen. If we knew exactly what was going to happen each day, how freaking boring would that be? Like, I
Yeah,
already know it's
man.
going
When you're on like a strict time schedule, and you're like, all right, it's 12 o'clock. Now it's time for lunch. Oh, it's 1 o'clock. Now it's time to
to.
press the machine.
No, see, I'm so, like, I tend to be a lot more spontaneous and just kind of let things happen. Like, yeah, I have my routines, as far as, like I said, I wake up, I pray, and I get my meditations in, and I work my workouts in, and all my reading and things like that. But I don't do it with this, like, rigid schedule where it's like it's got to be done at the same time every day. It's got to be, because I hear like quote unquote influencers, "Oh, I do my stuff every day at this time and every day," and I'm like, that's great, but I was like, I don't
That's
have to.
also exhausting.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't have to do everything at the same time every day, and I still get all of it done, and I still have all of my great habits and things that I use, but I'm not rigid about them. I used to, don't get me wrong, I was way more rigid about, like, when I worked out and things like that years ago, but now I'm just like, no, like, they're gonna happen, but it's not gonna be the same time every day. I let it just flow, however the day flows, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel so much. I feel so much less stress, if any stress, because I'm no longer like, oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up and get this done. I'm like, no, just it'll happen when it happens. It's okay, you know.
Well, I asked you about visualization because I was going to mention um, that when I meditate, visualization, like you were talking about how thoughts are racing. I find for me that when I meditate, usually for me it's audio and visual. So I'll put headphones in to listen to music or a meditation video or something. But what I've found that helps me a lot to quiet my mind is when I visualize something. Like I'll visualize either a blank space, like in my mind I'll picture like a blank screen, a completely white screen, nothing on it, or I'll visualize like the ocean or like
Hmm.
a mountain or something, and that helps me. This is just what helps me. It helps me slow. It basically kind of negates the racing thoughts.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Uh,
Well, yeah, and I do use, like, I'll use mantras when I lead, like, the meditation groups, like, that I lead. I walk people through a guided meditation. So I usually, well, almost always have them visualize things that I'm saying, just to get them narrowed in, kind of like you said, where they get narrowed into something. And then, like, a lot of times I'll have them use mantras. So I'll speak out a mantra while we're all in the middle of the meditation. I'll tell them, I want you to see these words in your mind, and whatever it is, I am love, I am love, I am love, whatever. And they see that in their mind, and then that gets them to focus, like you said, so that the mind's not racing all over the place, right? But
right.
the one thing I tell people when they're first learning to meditate is, I tell them, don't, because people get hyper focused on like, well, aren't I supposed to be able to turn my mind off? I'm like, you're not going to just turn your mind off. And that's why a lot of people don't meditate, because they're like, I can't. They're like, I tried and my mind just goes all over. And I'm like, that's okay. And like, remember, every time you sit in a 10-minute meditation and you keep your eyes closed, you sit there, you don't move, you don't grab your phone, you don't do anything, you just sit there. You literally just had a positive meditation. You literally just changed your brain chemistry a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Even even if you do a 10-minute meditation and you only get 30 seconds of focus, that's
Yeah. Oh,
still that's still progression, right? So if you do 10, like that's why I recommend like 10 minutes because it's a short amount of time. It doesn't take a lot of time out of your day for beginners, right? So that's what I mean is like, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So
absolutely.
if you never try it and you just do it once and you give up, then you're never going to progress.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's the thing. It's not about perfection. It's about just those baby steps. It's the thing is like, again, like, in the Tao, it says, just that small step every day is what over time brings out great results. And like, people think we got to do these like gargantuan things every day. You don't. You literally just take a small step every day in that direction of like improving yourself, whether it's that meditation and that workout. And, I chose to eat this instead of that, or like you said, I said no to buying the beer, whatever it is, that stuff adds up over time.
Oh yeah,
Right. We
because
beat
the
ourselves up because we try to get perfection in a day, and I'm like, that's just not the way it's meant to be. So
yeah, because it's you're basically, I mean, you're basically building a habit.
yeah, yeah, you're
So
creating you're creating things that naturally are going to make you better over time. You know, and that's why I tell people with meditation. I said it's a daily practice, and you do it every day, and over years you will see yourself. Even in 6 months and a year, you'll see yourself be different. You'll see yourself like, man, something that used to trigger me doesn't trigger me anymore. You know, and you realize like, wow. And then like for me, meditation has brought up a lot of things, like you were saying, stuff you healed from in therapy. Meditation brought up a lot of stuff for me, stuff that I didn't realize. It's brought out, it still brings out revelations to me when I'm in meditation. A lot of times I'll have these epiphanies about myself, about things that I need to heal with myself. I'm like, oh man, that's why I used to always do that, or that's why I've responded that way in relationships, or that's why, you know what I mean. And it's brought out so many things that were buried that I didn't know were just kind of stuffed down.
yeah,
So
I mean,
meditation is.
I will say, and I'm glad we're talking about meditation because I will say the only thing that kind of annoys me with therapy is they talk about science only.
Mhm.
They think about human behavior and the mind, but like that's what bothers me is because, and that's what we talked about, like you mentioned earlier, or if we're doing meditation groups and stuff, like I mentioned earlier, we need to have health in all three elements, not just the mind, not just the intellect, not just the monkey mind. That's not the only avenue of where we need to be healthy. That's what that's kind of what bothers me about therapies because they're like, oh well, the data shows, the science shows. It's like, dude, we're a species that doesn't only rely on science
Exactly.
because it's like, and I couldn't have the conversations that I wanted to have, like with the therapist, for example, because they wouldn't understand.
Mhm.
They probably think I'm crazy and fucking trying to send me to a psych ward if I try to talk to them what we're talking about right now. Like, oh, my whole life's been like this, blah blah, spirit and blah blah. They'd be like, oh, this guy's crazy, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's 100% truth. I think about, like, again, my spiritual mentor William Dyer. He at one point had a counseling practice, like, when he was, I don't know, I'm not sure his age at the time, but as he grew more and more into his spirituality, he got rid of all of that because, like he said, he goes, it just didn't sit with what he felt was, the deep, like these types of talks. That's the stuff he would teach when he was still alive. He taught that stuff and he wrote about that stuff, the stuff that we talk about. And like you said, this is the stuff that a lot of people want to talk about, but they're afraid to, because like you said, they feel like if they were to tell somebody, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you lost your mind. No, you didn't lose your mind. Like, because I don't live like these other people anymore doesn't mean that I lost my mind. It means that I've evolved beyond what I was taught, what I was programmed to be.
Right? Because we're not because we're not only creatures of the mind. There's a different avenues that like we said, we exist on three planes of existence at all times. So like when we're only acknowledging, or when society only acknowledges one, you're not going to be able to heal the whole person. So when I was talking about therapy, it helped me. It helped some light bulbs go off, but I did a lot of that work myself.
Hmm.
Because I'm like, like you said, I couldn't talk about this stuff to them because they'd be like, "Oh, let's put them in a psych ward. He's talking about spirits and seeing stuff, blah blah." But it's like you have to. That's why we, had this episode about stepping into your own power, because once you realize, like, oh, it's not just biological, it's not just physical. There's a lot more and deeper meaning to each and every individual person than just what the society tries to put a band-aid on, you know?
Absolutely. If people only knew, man, like the deeper, that's why I tell people go deep, because if you really go deep and you realize why you're actually here, and that you have a grander purpose than just, I always tell people, we didn't come here to fucking get jobs, pay bills, and die. You know what I mean? Like that's just stupid. Why? What the hell would be the point of that? Like we have such a greater purpose for being here. And when people start to dive deeper and realize like, wow, I'm here for so much more, like, yeah, dude. And you're gonna realize like, wow, life is so much deeper. And you start to want to, like, I'm sure like you and I've talked about this, and like I love diving deep, man. I love like getting into like, like some of the other folks that I listen to on their podcasts and stuff, and they're going deep and finding all these, like Robert Edward Grant. Always he's big into being in Egypt and the pyramids, and he's finding all these having he's revealing all these things that he's like started to find, and I'm like, look at all these like things that were put out there for us to learn and find and become. You know what I mean? But like, how many people are just literally going through their existence of just, I go to my job, I pay my bills, I go home. You know what I mean? And it's just the same bullshit over and over. And I'm like, why? There's so much more than that to this life.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, there's so much more to life than what we're programmed to believe.
exactly. Absolutely. That's why I tell people you have to basically reprogram yourself. You know, all those years that were sent that were spent programming us, now you have to like spend however many years to reprogram yourself to realize like, yeah, there's so much more to this life, and it's okay to be different than everybody else, and it's okay to not fall into the what people say is normal, right? To fall into the, hey, this is what you're supposed to be doing at this age and at this time and at this. I'm like, does that feel good to you? I don't know how many people are, oh, not really. I'm like, then don't do it. Give a shit what someone told you. You know what I mean? I really don't give a shit what people tell me. I'm like,
Yeah,
you
man,
have,
because I've always, like, for example, when I was talking about joining the military earlier, when I was in I joined when I was 18, so I was still in high school. And like, think about, like, for me personally, I felt a lot of pressure because I'm like, damn, I don't have college lined up. And I'm like, and I'm also, as a 18-year-old student, I'm like, how am I going to pay for college? Right? Because that's what's pushed on everybody. And that was one avenue. But, um, there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of unnecessary pressure on young people to follow a certain status quo just because they're told that that's what they have to follow, like we talked about this whole episode. And then they end up being sad and depressed and like, my life sucks, because they're not following what they were put here to do.
exactly. Yep.
And they also don't have the knowledge of, necessarily, because maybe they're not talking to people like you or me, and they're like, well, they're like I talked about when I met my wife. That's when it started to open up a lot more. And then when we met, it opened up a hell of a lot more. Remember we talked about manifesting shit, and it just started happening
Yep.
rapidly. And
Yep.
like, but there's some people who don't have that yet. But that doesn't mean that they can't find it.
No, and that's why we're putting this kind of information out there, right? I mean, I put it out there in the hopes that, I don't care if it's one person an episode, or God willing more, but like that like hear us and say, hmm, and it really like makes them question the way they've been living, the stuff they were taught. Like I tell people, it's okay to question what your parents taught you, right? I tell people like somebody's got to break the chain of, because as like, like your parents, they meant well, but they only did what they knew how to do, right? And so I tell people, so like, you have to come in and say, okay, like I'm gonna start looking at stuff in my own way. I'm gonna start questioning the way I was told to live, and what I was told was normal. And start to go by, like you said, like what's in my heart, what makes me happy, what truly lights me up, what lights my soul up, you know, and follow that. and then watch how life will shift. And it may very well look very different than everyone in your family, your friends, everything. Like it may look different than all of that. And I will say that as you grow spiritually, and I'm sure you could attest to this, like as you grow spiritually and you start to go deeper and you start to shift these things, at times it can feel lonely because the people that used to be around you, and if they're not going with you in that same path, they're like, what is up with him? You know what I mean, or her. And it's like, well, I'm evolving, I'm growing, I'm ascending, and it doesn't mean I'm better than anybody. It just means that like I'm going on that path and I'm headed that way. And like I tell people, it may be lonely for a little while, but guess what? Your soul tribe will find you. Your soul tribe will find you.
Yep.
You know, you and I, like how we met, same thing. I mean, it's just like the more you start doing that stuff, you start to meet the people you're intended to meet, right? And the ones that aren't intended to be in your life, they can either still be there or they can fall away. You know, um, and I never push anybody away, but I always tell people like I'm not gonna stop evolving and growing and going deep into this stuff just because someone else might tell me, you know, I can't believe you're doing that. You know what I mean? Like, why do you think like that now? Why not? Why do I believe in reincarnation? Why do I believe in other beings? Why do I,
Well, you know, actually, it just made me think. Another thing about that concept is that when you start, for lack of a better term, you can basically start calling people on their bullshit because you know the truth. You know what I mean? Or you can see the truth before everyone. Like you said, you can read a room, right? And that irritates people because most people, there's a saying that if you speak the truth, you're hated, right? That's not the quote, but that's basically what it is. So, like, once you start on this path, like you said, it could become lonely a little bit because now you're calling shit for what it is. You see it, and you feel things for what they are rather than what people want you to believe.
exactly. And that's the thing. What do people want you to do? Most people just want you to conform, right? Because then like it's comfortable for them. When you question the status quo, people are like, wait a minute, why are they questioning what we taught them? Like, well, because I've gone beyond that ceiling that you taught me. Now I've gone beyond that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have questions about this. And people just want you just to fit into the mold. I don't care about fitting in the mold. You know what I mean? I really don't. I'm like, I
We're
have
here.
my
We're here to help break the mold.
exactly. Absolutely. I always tell people I'm here to break the chain, man. Like I'm not here to be like everyone else. I'm just not. And people can judge me for that all they like. You're welcome to. I tell people, but I'm still going to be who I am, and I'm going to be authentic to myself. And again, I always tell myself like the right people will find you at the right time.
Beautifully said. Well, Brian, did you want to end this? You want to do the prayer this time?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
I'm gonna just go off of just kind of what I feel. Thank you, God, for this time. Thank you for this opportunity with Nate and I. Thank you for bringing this friendship together. I pray that this gets out into the world, that we can inspire people to find their true, authentic self that you made them to be. Because each one of our souls is here with its own purpose, and there will never be another Nate or another Brian or another, whoever is listening. So I hope that they take this. It helps them question things. It helps them find the depths of who they are, and that they take their gifts, their light, and their beauty out to the world, because that is what we need. We need the authentic versions of each and every one of us to shift this world for the better. I know that the energy is changing and shifting for the better. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for this time. Thank you for this day. I send out much love, peace, joy, healing, prosperity, and unity to all. Amen.
Amen. All right, everybody. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
See you guys next time.